kind of like shooting fish in a barrel because it was running a surplus every year.
Money. It was free money.
And so they never had to worry, they
Right.
thought. But then the baby boomer situation came around, and so now, yes.
They don't want to pay it back.
Well, I mean, they will. I mean, you know, they'll borrow money from China and have to pay it back.
Right, exactly. Right. And that's what, when we hear crisis, oh, there's a crisis. There's not a crisis.
No.
It's always posed like this is some kind of entitlement system that, you know, people are sponging off the government or something.
Well, they want to use that so that they can do things like means testing. You know, means testing, I'm sure you know what that is.
As far
if you make a certain amount of money,
right.
they cut your Social Security.
Right, right.
Oh, wait a minute, you know.
They paid into it.
I paid into it.
Exactly.
I want it back.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
I mean, that's un-American.
Yeah.
And, you know, Americans believe in equity,
right?
Know, fairness. That's not fair. And
right.
They're not going to buy that.
Well, unless they get the wrong information. And I mean, when people hear, oh, it's easy to leave. Oh, you know, obviously, if I'm getting a check every month, you know, there must be a deficit somewhere. The government must be struggling. We must have to reform this somehow, and people believe that, and you don't hear anywhere reported that there's $2.5 trillion sitting there in a trust fund.
There is, and they get interest on it. What else could you want? I mean, what would you do with the money if you wouldn't loan it to the government?
Right.
You want to loan it to some other country?
Right. Well, then you get into risky investment.
That's right.
And they don't want to exactly.
But you know, by common definition, the riskless security in this country is treasury bonds.
Right.
Or any treasury security. There is no risk.
Right. Right. It's low interest, but when you're talking when you talk about trillions of dollars,
that's right.
It's still acceptable.
But you know, when you have $2 trillion, $5 trillion, or three, I've got three, but it's a little. Maybe my numbers aren't quite up to date. But if you run 5% against that, it comes out to a nice little number.
Yeah.
You know? And people need to know that. They'd feel better about it.
Yeah.
A lot of my students in classes used to say, you know, I don't want to pay into it because I'm never going to get it. I said, yes, you are.
Right.
You name me one politician who would be willing to get up and say, I'm for doing away with Social Security.
Right.
You know how many older people, that's what they rely on to live on?
Oh, sure.
You know, my parents died, you know, in the last 2 years, both of them, but they were living on Social Security until their taxes got so high on their home, which was a very modest home, 1,300 square feet, $6,600 taxed.
That was this area?
No, New York. Which
oh,
is
okay.
Very correct.
Right.
You think this is corrupt? It's even worse there.
Yeah.
And so I got them a reverse mortgage on their house, and you know, then they were fine. You've heard of
yes.
everyone because they advertise.
Right. It. But that was their money. That was money they paid in
exactly
to the system.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, there's sort of a contract. You're going to pay in, and then eventually you're going to get this back. And since they're, like you said, they're investing these funds in bonds. I mean, they should be able to theoretically go on forever, even running a surplus if they do it right.
Well, you know, some changes have to be made because one thing, people are living so much longer.
Yeah.
When they first started this in 1935, I think the average person lived to 62. My father just died at 98. My mom 92. Yeah. They were on Social Security from the time they were 62 on up.
Yeah.
That's what's doing it. You don't even hear that, but that's it.
Yeah.
Because I looked at the administrative costs and so forth. They don't look outrageous. You know, for managing all of this.
Right. It's a low overhead.
Yeah.
Because they're not doing like a mutual fund. I mean, they're just investing in one area.
That's right. Like I mean, the money comes in, the surplus goes right into the trust fund. They get paper bonds. They actually have the bonds, and they pay a market rate of interest.
Now, some people would just like to get rid of Social Security entirely and privatize it, hand it over to Wall Street. Of course, I don't even want to think about what would have happened after the stock market crash. You know, where people's retirement would have been. If Bush had been able to do that. But you have a kind of a different take on that.
Well, I mean, I think that the Social Security system is fine right now and will be fine for a lot of years, some minor adjustments. But other countries have successfully privatized. Well, when you get that word private in there, people get nervous. I don't want to be in the stock market. You wouldn't have to be in the stock market. Everything could be business as usual. Instead of the Social Security Trust Fund having all those bonds, the individuals would. My take on this would be, let's let the people put their money into nothing but U.S. Treasury bonds, zero risk. And here's what the results would be, okay? I just did this today, I hope I didn't make any mistakes. I'm a finance professor, so I shouldn't. Assuming that someone makes $45,000 a year, which is about the average wage in the United States, and makes that amount of money for the next 40 years, got a job, and that's it, doesn't get any raises. So in other words, it can be better than what I'm saying. And that he or she, put their money into Social Security, and what that would come to a year is $5,840, because see, that's both ends of it. That's 12.4% of 45,000. That's $5,800 a year.
Right, going into retirement funds.
Into the privatized retirement fund, which is 100% U.S. government treasury bonds.
Right.
Okay? So there's no Wall Street involved in that.
Right.
Okay? Now,
and the government couldn't default on it if you, if you had it in your hand.
Well, there's a lot of advantages to it. Number one, the things that we've been talking about, the federal government can now change how much you're going to get.
Right, right. That's true.
If it's yours, they can't change it.
That is true.
It's in your own account.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, if you put that money in there every year for 40 years at 4.21%. Now, 4.21% is the estimated return on treasury bonds for infinity. So I took that number, because no one knows into the future,
Right.
but that's, that's conservative. Then you would have $560,444 in your own personal account.
At the end of 30 years?
40.
40, okay.
Okay? Say, well, what does that do for me? Well, in today's money, that's a lot, but you have to understand that I took the assumption that everything stays the same, but we have 2 or 3 or 4% inflation. That means the 45,000 that you're making is going to go up, and you're going to put more.
Well, we sure appreciate you talking to us, and let me just go over kind of what we've said today. Right now, there's $2.5 trillion in a trust fund.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. They don't even have to touch that trust fund until 2014, 2015.
Right now it's 2016.
2016.
They're saying, but it's actually 2024 when you count the interest.
Okay, so 2024, they don't even have to go near the trust
Nothing.
fund. And at that point, if they start dipping into the trust fund, it's 2052 before that runs out. And then at that point, again, assuming there's, I guess, no growth in the economy, nothing else changes, they'll still be able to pay 80%.
Yes.
Okay.
Somewhere's around that, yes, that's true.
Well, Dr. Tony Apap, thank you very much.
You're welcome
We
again.
appreciate it. Folks, if you're concerned about Social Security, concerned about people raiding it or looting it, I suggest you call Representative Jeff Miller and tell him your thoughts. I'm Deborah Nelson. Thanks very much for tuning in. Good night.